Hello everyone! Welcome to the Teaching Diversity in the Classroom workshop. My name's Yukawa and I am an American 5th year ALT living in Higashi-Sonogi. It's a small town about 25 minutes north of Omura City. I work at one junior high school and teach grades 1 through 3. I just want to thank you all for joining my workshop. I know COVID has made things really difficult for everyone, so I really appreciate your interest in this topic and your understanding in attending this workshop through YouTube. Today, we will discuss teaching diversity and culture in the classroom. This subject is an extremely important one to teach, but is sadly often overlooked. The English textbooks have some sections which discuss culture, but the focus is definitely to teach vocabulary and grammar first. I find that talks of culture are more often than not stereotyped and shallow in their explanations. With the textbook that I use now, even though I don't have any problems with the grammar it teaches particularly, some of the examples they use in regards to race and ethnicity are a little exaggerated and cliché. Not to mention, representation in them is lacking. This is where we ALTs and JTEs come into play. Teaching diversity in the classroom will not only pique the interest of English in our students, but also prepare them for when they become adults. Whether they become business people, working with a diverse group of co-workers, traveling to a foreign country with their friends, or even just encountering a foreigner in the supermarket. My hope is that we as English teachers can prepare our students to have an open mind and curiosity about how other people live their lives. I think this all starts in the classroom. English levels, number of schools, willingness from your JTEs, HRTs, or ALTs can all be factors when we make lessons. However, my hope is that in this workshop, you will learn a few skills to bring into your classes to help broaden your students' understanding of the world. So in this workshop, I want to break up the information into two parts. First, I will explain some simple things we can add to our classes. They don't take a lot of preparation, and both ALTs and JTEs can do these things. The second part of the workshop is introducing a presentation that I have perfected over the years. Hopefully, everything is easy to understand and you enjoy the illustrations. So, without further ado, let's begin the workshop. A lot of our students' exposure to foreigners is often limited to textbooks, music, movies, and television. They don't see foreigners on a personal level through media unless that person excels at any given thing. For example, Usain Bolt, the famous Jamaican runner. Our students see him and other Jamaican runners doing well on the Olympics, and then they assume all Jamaicans run fast. These assumptions aren't limited to only our students. Everyone has stereotypes and assumptions that they have about other people. And I think that's mainly due to a lack of diverse exposure to those groups. As ALTs, we have this awesome ability to teach our students so much more than just English. We do this by simply being around them. They see us every day, get used to our hairstyles, eye color, opinions, and even our English accents. This learning is done organically, but even being in a single school every single day will not supplement a diverse understanding of foreign people and culture unless done proactively. For JTEs, You spend so much more time with your students than we ALTs do. Your participation in exposing your students to foreign concepts and people is just as important. You have the ability to explain nuances in Japanese and support your ALT in their presentations and games. Working well with your ALT and taking the time to explain cultural differences sets a good example for your students. Now, before I give any kind of advice, I just want to start with a disclaimer. I am not an expert on this topic, and I could be doing this completely wrong. But this is something that I'm really passionate about, and I have been implementing this in my school since I got here. I've had a really positive reaction from my teachers, and even though I've made a few mistakes along the way, I've seen my students express feelings and opinions that far exceeded my expectations of children from a small rural town. This works for me in my school, but if you don't see it working for you, feel free to change it up and add your own twist to it. With that being said, I wanted to talk to you about some things that I've picked up along the way that helped me. So first, pictures. You'd be surprised at how much power pictures have. I like to show my students pictures that highlight different kinds of people at various cultural events. This was pretty difficult when I first started my job as an ALT. For example, when I searched the words American Family Thanksgiving. All the families for some reason were white, which doesn't portray a realistic representation of all of America. I had to purposely type in Black Family Thanksgiving Dinner or Asian Family Thanksgiving Dinner to get the images I was looking for. Thankfully, I've noticed finding these pictures have become a bit easier recently. I sometimes use pictures of my family as well. For example, for Thanksgiving, my family would always order sushi because my dad's Japanese, and Irish cheese because my stepmom is Irish American. Finding these pictures took a little bit more time and effort, but I think this plants the idea in your students' heads without having to have a long, complicated conversation about it. Next, names. Our students know names from the textbook like Mike, Judy, and Miss Brown. Using all kinds of names from all over in your example sentences will prepare your students for when they go out into the real world and meet people who have more unique names. No offense to any Mikes or Judys out there though, I mean, your names are valid too. I'm just saying diversity is good. I hadn't thought about the importance of names until I talked to an African American ALT who was tired of the lack of diversity in the names that she was teaching to her students. To combat this, she looked through her old high school yearbook and picked out names that reflected her hometown. Not only was she helping her students understand a broader range of names, but also sharing a bit of herself with her students, which I think is great. Okay, the third one, talking about your own experiences. A lot of us come from countries with diverse populations. If you have a mixed background or unique cultural aspect about your upbringing, teaching that to your students will not only broaden their understanding of your country, but you as well. I remember once in a textbook, my students read that American children don't get New Year's money for New Year's. I listened and I thought it was interesting because I get New Year's money, even as a 27-year-old man. So I made a presentation about getting New Year's money and Christmas presents as a kid, and explained that not only I, but many other Asian American children get it during Lunar New Year. The students were really interested, and it changed the dynamic of who was American in their minds. But you don't have to come from a multicultural background to talk about your unique experiences either. I remember talking to my students about how people in my hometown eat squirrel meat. I know, but the reaction from my students when I told them was priceless. By the way, don't be afraid to contradict stereotypes or things that the students learn in school. In fact, I love contradicting things that the students learn in school so that I can give my students a real, authentic experience of learning about foreign cultures and people. That's what makes being an ALT super fun. This is reinforcing the idea that generalizations are just that, generalizations. Next, English boards. English boards can prove to be an awesome tool for English teachers who want to teach students some fun topics in English. I know that not every school has an English board, but for those of us that do, it might be a good idea to use it to your advantage. I personally don't use my English board for any deep cultural information exchange, but I usually stick with seasonal English boards. But I know a few ALTs that use their English boards as their sole means of presenting culture to their students. Preparing an English board may take a lot of time, but you can get creative with it and show off your artistic skills you may have. Even if you don't have any particular artistic skills, printing things out, making interesting worksheets, and doing a theme that the students are interested in can really bring a lot of traffic to your English board. I've noticed that a lot of teachers come and talk to me while I'm working on my English board, so it's a really great way to get to know the teachers that you work with as well. I have seen many English boards that introduce countries, cultures, and even compare and contrast the ALT's country with Japan. Having Japanese on your English board to help with any lower level students could be a great gateway to get unenthusiastic students to turn to English. For a recommendation, I recommend the Facebook group Japan ALT English Boards. I've gotten a lot of great ideas from the group, and ALTs are usually very happy to share information or techniques with you. Or videos. I can't stress enough how important a tool videos can be in class. When learning about a country or holiday, the best way to get your students interested is to show them videos. Once, I did a culture presentation on Hawaiian hula. After I had my students discuss why is hula important and how is Hawaiian hula and the hula in Japan different. It was difficult to get opinions out of them, but after I showed them a 2-minute video of hula, the answers came out a lot easier. When using videos in class, I recommend using a 1 to 3 minute video. That way, it doesn't take too much time from class, and you get to keep your students' attention. Having the video downloaded on a USB drive would also help with any unwanted ads. Now, I don't know what any of y'all are watching on your school's computers, but just to be safe that no recommended inappropriate videos show up on YouTube, I think USBs are the way to go. Now I'm super excited to talk to you about a style of presentation that I've been doing since I was a first year. I perfected this style for my situation, but every situation is different and you might not be able to do it exactly like me. I can definitely see some ALTs watching this video thinking, well, Kyle has one school that he goes to every single day and has plenty of time to prepare these videos, which I totally get, and that's true. However, I feel like this presentation could easily be used as an activity to keep in the back of your pocket for when you have an extra 15 or 20 minutes in class. On the other hand, you could do it like me and do it in the morning every week and then review in class later in the day. But I'll get more into that later. First, let's talk about the presentation itself. This presentation is called Kokusai Rikai. It translates into English as International Understanding. It's a 15-minute presentation that can be performed live or pre-recorded. It helps students practice English listening while giving ALTs the creative freedom to make presentations about anything that they want. I think this style of presentation is really popular with JTEs because it helps prepare students for listening tests to get into high school. I'm sure that from high school to university, the listening tests aren't that different, so it's a really great way to practice all around. I've been using these presentations as an excuse to teach my students about pretty difficult subjects that they don't learn in other classes. When it's time to start making my presentation, I always start with a topic. I make it on anything from a holiday coming up or a country that I think is interesting. Usually I'll look online and see if there are any international holidays going on. I do a lot of research before I choose the topic, and I make sure to look at multiple articles or websites before I start trying to figure out if I can make it into an easy to use presentation. For JTEs, I think that this would be a really great time for you to look in the textbook and see if there's anywhere your ALT could, give a little bit more explanation for any programs that might be coming up. This would make your explanation of the context of the conversations going on in the textbook a lot easier. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to make a Kokusai Rikai presentation for you so you can see my whole process and how I do everything. So this time, let's go with the topic of Maori people. And I'm sorry if I butcher some of the names throughout this presentation. I'm really sorry. Now that we have our topic, we can start with the script. So I teach junior high school students, like I said, so their English level might be a bit different from yours. Just keep their level in mind when you're making everything and you should be fine. But I usually aim for second graders level for my presentations, so it's a little difficult for the first graders and it's a little easy for the third. I can always change the difficulty of my reviews later on in class, but I find that if I aim for second graders level, usually everyone is happy. I try my hardest when making these scripts to use simple, natural sounding English, because let's be honest, our students aren't hearing a lot of it in class or from the textbook. Also, when I'm making my script, I find that 200 words should be the perfect length. Anything less than that or anything more than that will kind of mess up the 15 minutes that you get when reviewing with the students. So I'm going to try and make a short script right now for you so you can see my process. Okay, the script is done, we're finished. Great. Now, we will choose 6 new words that either play an important part in the story or are words that our students haven't learned yet. I tend to use these words as an opportunity to teach my students slang or grammar points that I want them to have practice using. Usually words like famous, popular, favorite, very easy words, but for some reason, my students at least always forget them. For grammar points, I usually try to put in a lot of I think that or I want to. These are grammar points that are really useful that we can keep using in our presentations, and eventually, maybe, hopefully, they'll stick. So here I am just putting in the 6 new words that I pick out of the script, and I will write the Japanese meaning right beside them. So if you don't understand Japanese that well, don't worry about it, it's completely fine. There are a lot of apps and websites that you can use that are really helpful. I like jisho.org, and I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but I actually use Google Translate for a lot of single words and kanji. If you just look up on Google, you can find a website or an app that works for you. I'm sure you'll find something. But just in case, if all of that still doesn't work, I usually ask my JTE or a teacher around me for help. It can be a great segue into having a conversation with them, and who knows, maybe you could become really great friends because you asked a simple question. So I want to make the presentation a little bit more interactive to make sure my students are paying attention. So I make 5 true and false questions. I usually make them super easy and I don't use words they don't know that much yet. If the question is false, I make it to where only one word in the sentence is incorrect. So for example, in winter, Japanese people enjoy cherry blossom viewing. This statement is false, and the correct statement would be in spring, Japanese people enjoy cherry blossom viewing. So that's kind of the difference between true and false. So the reason why I make my question so easy is because a lot of our students are used to understanding at least 80% of the content before answering questions. This isn't limited to only our English classes, but I find that in art class, even in music class, in math class, the students practice the grammar or whatever subject they're going over that day quite a lot before they start practicing answering questions. But at least when I make my Kokusai Rikai presentations, I'm moving words around and using grammar that maybe they haven't learned yet, and in some ways, they get really confused. But one of my professors in university said, language is 30% scholastic and 70% guessing. I hope my students can become better guessers because at the end of the day, we all have to guess linguistically. It doesn't matter if you are a native English speaker or not, we all are introduced to words every once in a while that we've never heard of. We have no idea where they came from. So we have to guess what they mean. So I want to prepare my students to be good guessers linguistically. So the true and false questions are just ways that they can continuously work hard and to get a better score and not focus so much on how much of my English they didn't understand. Okay, so now we are finished with writing our presentation. The only thing left to do is to put this information that we created into a PowerPoint and add some cool pictures to give your students an idea of what you're talking about. So when it comes to pictures and the layout of the PowerPoint, I pretty much made this sample presentation for you. And in the video, what I'm doing right now is just inserting what we just wrote into the presentation itself. I already had some pictures saved that I wanted to use from another presentation that I did before, and I just put them right in there to save some time. Usually for the pictures, I try to use as high quality pictures as possible because, at least for myself, I put my presentation on a pretty big TV screen, and when you do that, the quality of the pictures are, stretched out. So if you don't have a good picture, sometimes it's hard to see. Another thing that I like to do is add GIFs or GIFs, however you say it, into my presentations when it's a little harder to explain something. I know I did a Halloween presentation recently where I was trying to explain haunted houses, the ones where you walk through a house and people in costumes jump out and scare you. Explaining that was a little difficult for my students, so it was a funny kind of gag that I put into my presentation where I put multiple GIFs all over the slides, and it was funny. The students laughed because you got to see people's scared faces. So I recommend playing around with it and, adding some GIFs, or you could do some sound effects. I know some ALTs who have done similar presentations to this have actually put whole YouTube videos playing in the background with no music on it while they talk. So it's limitless of how much you can do creatively. Okay, so we're done writing it. We're done putting all of our pictures and our cool little videos and stuff into the PowerPoint. Now it's time to actually perform your Kokusai Rikai. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a video that I have recorded and played for my students at my school. Hello everyone! Today is Kokusai Rikai Day. So, I want to talk to you about Maori people. But first, I will introduce the new words. Kinds of. Kinds of. Native people. Native people. Important meaning. Important meaning. Famous. Famous. Culture. Culture. Greeting. Greeting. Do you know this country? Yes, it's New Zealand. New Zealand is famous for rugby and beautiful nature. There, we can see many kinds of people, but Maori are the native people of New Zealand. They have lived in New Zealand for a really long time. Please look at these pictures. What unique thing do you notice about them? Yes, they all have tattoos. Their tattoos are called tomoko. Each tattoo has a very important meaning. They tell a story about the person's life and family. Women and men have tattoos. I think they are really cool. I think tomoko look like Ainu people's tattoos a little bit. Maybe the most famous thing about Maori people are their dances. Do you know the Haka dance? In New Zealand, people dance the Haka at sports games, weddings, funerals, and dance parties. The New Zealand rugby team dances the Haka before a rugby game. Haka dances have an important meaning too. Do you know Moana? In Moana, we can see Maori culture too. This is how Maori people greet. We say Hongi. I think this greeting is very beautiful. New Zealand has beautiful nature and people. It's a very safe country with an interesting history. Do you want to see a Haka dance? Now I will read the true and false questions 2 times. Number 1. New Zealand has beautiful nature. New Zealand has beautiful nature. Number 2. Maori's tattoos are called Irezumi. Maori's tattoos are called Irezumi. Number 3. The Haka dance is very famous. The Haka dance is very famous. Number 4. In Toy Story, we can see Maori culture. In Toy Story, we can see Maori culture. Number 5. Maori's greeting is Hongi. Maori's greeting is Hongi. Now I will say the new words one more time. Kinds of. Kinds of. Native people. Native people. Important meaning. Important meaning. Famous. Famous. Culture. Culture. Greeting. Greeting. Do you know this country? Yes, it's New Zealand. New Zealand is famous for rugby and beautiful nature. There, we can see many kinds of people, but Maori people are the native people of New Zealand. They have lived in New Zealand for a really long time. Please look at these pictures. What unique thing do you notice about them? Yes, they all have tattoos. Their tattoos are called tomoko. Each tattoo has a very important meaning. They tell a story about the person's life and family. Women and men have tattoos. I think they're really cool. I think tomoko look like Ainu people's tattoos a little bit. Maybe the most famous thing about Maori people are their dances. Do you know the Haka dance? In New Zealand, people dance the Haka at sports games, weddings, funerals, and family parties. The New Zealand rugby team always dances the Haka before a rugby game. Haka dances have an important meaning too. Do you know Moana? In Moana, we can see Maori culture too. This is how Maori people greet. We say Hongi. I think this greeting is very beautiful. New Zealand has beautiful nature and people. It's a very safe country with an interesting history. Do you want to see a Haka dance? Now, I will say the true and false questions one more time. Number 1. New Zealand has beautiful nature. Number 2. Maori's tattoos are called Irezumi. Number 3. The Haka dance is very famous. Number 4. In Toy Story, we can see Maori culture. Number 5. Maori's greeting is Hongi. Are you ready for the answers? Number 1 is true. Number 2 is false. Number 3 is true. Number 4 is false. And number 5 is true. Now, please write a comment. Okay, we're finished. Thank you so much for sitting through that. I know it was probably a little difficult for you, seeing as how the presentation is geared toward junior high school students. But hopefully, after listening to it, you found a couple things that might have been useful to you, whether that be how fast I was going, or what kind of English I was using, or what kind of pictures I was using. So that's there for you. Here is a slide that I'm showing you right now, and it's topics that I've covered in class before. I know when I first started making Kokusai Rikai presentations in class, the most difficult thing for me was finding good ideas and topics to use for my presentations. And so I just provided a couple ideas on this list. I have a more extensive list that I can send anyone that wants it. I don't only make videos about international things or diverse culture. I also do about just, normal holidays and, country introduction videos. But these are ones that did pretty well in my classes. So, presenting the Kokusai Rikai is all finished. But I know throughout the workshop, I mentioned multiple times that I review the presentation with my students afterwards. I think it might be helpful to explain to you how I do this. So, long before I actually present my Kokusai Rikai, I get together with my JTE and ask her to translate my English script into Japanese. We have established this way of doing it for a while now, but I always ask her if she needs help or if she's too busy. I feel bad for asking her to do this, but my school expects me to do these presentations every week, and her worksheets really help the students. I don't want her to be too stressed out over something like this though, so keeping your JTE's feelings in mind, I think, is a great way to go. So right now I'm showing you an example of a Japanese script my JTE makes me. This is the Japanese translation of the Maori script we made together. We take the English and Japanese scripts to give to the students in class. However, when I'm reviewing the presentation with the students, we ask them not to look at the English script yet. Usually, they'll use this English script when they're making presentations of their own in English class. I start off the lesson by writing 1 through 6 on the board and ask the students if they can remember the new words. If they do, I give the students who raise their hands a sticker. After that, we practice pronunciation one more time and go onward to the speech. Now I only do the speech one time and I don't review the true and false answers yet. While I'm presenting my Kokusai Rikai, the students are writing the answers in the blanks on their Japanese worksheets. This way, they will understand the story and its nuances, even if they're not very good at English. After I finish, I simply ask questions about the content. Questions that use words like who, what, when, where, and why. I find that I have to tailor my questions to my students' level a lot, but the younger students seem to be much more lively than my third years, so I don't worry about the review too much. After those questions, I quickly go over the true and false answers and ask the students to tell me the correct answers for the false statements. Lastly, I or my JTE goes over the answers for the Japanese worksheet. After that, if we still have time, I might show a video and then have a discussion afterwards. I've had a lot of videos that I've used in the past and they tend to have really good results, but it all depends on your JTE. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed all the information about teaching diversity in the classroom. All of the materials that I used, I'll try to link somewhere, whether that be in the description box or on the Nagasaki Jet website. If you have any questions or concerns, again, please let me know. I will be more than willing to help you. Teaching these things in the classroom might not seem like they have an effect on our students, but I want to part with you a little story before I go about an experience that I had a few years ago. So during my third year, I had students who had made negative comments about people with darker skin. I was really upset by this, and so I made a few presentations about famous African Americans for Black History Month. A student from that class wrote me a small little letter saying that her hero was former American President Barack Obama because, and I quote, "There was a lot of discrimination in America, but Obama became the first black president of the USA. I want to be a creative advocate like him." Those small words, using English vocabulary that I taught her, made all those hours making these presentations and showing these pictures and videos completely worth it. I hope that you'll be able to reach your students like I was really lucky to do with that one student. Even if you can't reach all of the students, even if there are a lot of them that don't care about your presentations, I guarantee you there is at least one student who's listening. Thank you.